Well, Major League Baseball continues to go back and forth with its Players Association on different models, different potential agreements, as we welcome in Shi Davidi Ben Nicholson-Smith from Sportsnet.ca and the Blue Jays on Sportsnet. Fellas, look, we have to put a time, an hour on this. It's just after 4 o'clock Eastern time on Monday, the 8th of June, because like so much of what's gone on in the world over the last few months, things change quickly. But it appears that baseball's latest proposal to the players is not that different than the one they sent out last week. Is this just a shuffling of the deck chairs or not, Shai?
It's actually pretty funny. I just got a text from an agent, and he said, at first glance, I looked at this and I thought, oh, this might be a step forward. And then he got into the details. It's like, it's the same thing. This is a total joke. And I think that's some of the reaction that we're hearing right now from the player side, in that this isn't a meaningful step. The way that I look at it is each of these back and forths, there's been an incremental move towards a middle ground, a creation of what a middle ground is going to look like, something in the neighborhood of 70 to 80 games, different kind of financial pay structures that you could use. But neither side is really willing to make a substantial move just yet. And I think that's because there isn't a firm deadline. One thing we've seen from baseball in recent years, if there's no deadline, nothing really happens. We're starting to push up against a time frame which they're going to lose a good part of July, which neither side can really afford to do. And I think that may eventually bring the sides towards a deal.
Ben, how did you interpret what we saw on Monday from baseball?
You know what? It is, like Shai said, these sides do remain pretty far apart. And, I do think there is time remaining for them to come together. I think when you look at baseball's, the incentives in place here do push the sides together toward a deal eventually. It's just a question of when that happens. And, I think when you're looking at a proposal that would pay the players only 50% guaranteed of their prorated salaries, it's pretty understandable that they would push back against that. I mean, that could go up to 75% if the playoffs are played. But at this point, that's not a guarantee. As long as this pandemic is ongoing, then the players can't be assured that they will get that chance. So in a sport where guaranteed salaries have been central to the players' strength as a union, I'm not surprised that this is being met with some skepticism right now.
Yeah, and why is the postseason so important? When you look at the broadcast money, the national broadcast money, the postseason represents 70% of the money that goes to Major League Baseball from the different networks. I still don't get it, guys. I still don't get it. Basketball's come out and said July 31st we're going to get things underway. It looks like hockey's going to go in August. Baseball had a massive opportunity here to own the marketplace for almost all of July. And it looks like it's not going to happen for the entire month of July. And they just look like they're airing their dirty laundry in public, which they are. And it's damaging to the brand. Fully understanding there's a CBA negotiation coming up soon. But how much bad are they doing? How much harm are they doing to baseball by going through this dance?
Well, Arash, I'll tell you that if you're following the rhetoric and you're riding the roller coaster, this looks awful, right? They look like children, as if they're essentially trying to drive their product into the ground. But if you take a step back and look at it dispassionately, I mean, this isn't very dissimilar from any other labor type of negotiation. And the backdrop of the CBA being up at the end of the 2021 season is pivotal here. I really think what you've seen from the Major League Baseball side to this point is intent in part on creating little wedges within the union, trying to weaken them, really testing any soft spots that they might have. I mean, you think about the tiered salary proposal where they were essentially trying to pit the richest players against those players making the least amount of money. These were all things, if you're taking a step back, sort of designed to create some dissent within the union.
Shai, let me stop you there. I get all that. But this is how this comes across to me. This is an arrogance from baseball saying that we don't really care if we're going to play in July. This is about the CBA down the road, not understanding the opportunity in a global pandemic with people at home, with people craving any kind of content, people craving a sport, and people who will provide you goodwill down the road when you're trying to compete for people's money, their disposable income down the road. Here's a real chance. And I get that you want to create dissent with the players, but to me, this looks like you're not seeing the forest through the trees.
But you're also not at the deadline yet. They haven't ruled themselves out of July games. They can get at least a half month, maybe a bit more than that, into July. And ultimately, if you're too focused on this year and not on the bigger picture, then you're going to cost yourself money from the owner's side down the road, and from the players as well. If they buckle too quickly, then that's going to hurt them. And to me, that's the driving factor here. This is part of a larger negotiation, and you have to put the full package together.
It doesn't sound like there's going to be a negotiation with the Blue Jays in Canada, playing games up here should there be any kind of 2020 season. On Monday, Ontario Premier Doug Ford in his news conference said, we still need to have conversations with MLB and the Blue Jays. And Ford did not make it sound like they're far down the road with Major League Baseball or Toronto's club. Ben, what are you hearing on what this season may look like from a Blue Jays standpoint?
Well, the Blue Jays would like to play in Toronto if they can. I mean, that would be plan A. I think when you start to look at the logistics involved, you start to look at everything that would have to fall into place, not only to get the players through customs, and that's not just the Blue Jays, but of course the visiting players, but then also to have all the support staff involved. It really would be a considerable undertaking. And of course, that's the case anywhere. But in Dunedin, Florida, where the Blue Jays have their spring training site, they would have enough facilities there to potentially set up for the season and play at their Class A affiliates' home. Now, that's not ideal, obviously, but if they had to do it for one season or for part of a season, that's likely what the Blue Jays would turn to and basically make this thing up as they go along.
Guys, Bob Nightingale of USA Today was on Sportsnet 590 The Fan on Monday afternoon. He believes, this is what he said on the air, he believes something's going to get worked out by the end of this week between baseball and the Players Association. How do you guys see this thing unfolding?
Well, I would expect them to come up with something, if it's not by the end of this week, in the near future, because the clock very much is ticking. If you think back, the owners have essentially put a cap on how far they're willing to go by saying no regular season games in October. And so if you want to get in 70, 80 odd games, you've got to have a spring training in there too. I mean, the calendar boxes you into that. So, baseball, as I mentioned earlier, generally works to deadlines. They've got a loose deadline in right now, and the players know that the longer this drags on, the fewer games they're going to have, and that's going to limit their earning power.
Yeah, okay. This really is crunch time for the players and for the owners. And I think, I understand when fans or anyone in the game is frustrated by the state of negotiations right now, because it's a pandemic. We could all use the entertainment, as you were saying, Arash. I mean, there are bigger picture things in play here than the Major League Baseball season. But I'm not worried yet. I will be worried if it could safely be played in July or August and they don't have any agreement. But we're not there now. And I think the next week or 10 days will go a long way toward telling us, is this crisis mode in the way it was in 1994? Or is it simply a negotiation with tens of billions or at least billions of dollars at stake and all kinds of different shareholders, each with different agendas and priorities? And I think it's the latter. So if that's the case, not a surprise that it would take some time, not a surprise that that first proposal wasn't accepted. And I'm hoping and thinking that at some point in the next week or 10 days, we see an agreement.
Unlikely they will play on the 4th of July to open a 2020 season should baseball get its act together. But I think the one thing we can agree on, they missed a great opportunity to own the sports marketplace for much of the month of July before basketball and hockey get underway in August. That's Ben Nicholson-Smith and Shi Davidi, Sportsnet at home.